The Battle of the Malacca Strait on the 16th of May, 1945, also known as Operation Dukedom, was the last major surface naval engagement of the Second World War. It was also the final occasion on which Royal Navy destroyers sank a major warship with torpedoes in surface combat. The victim of this night action was the heavy cruiser Haguro of the Imperial Japanese Navy, one of the last operational capital ships remaining in the Japanese fleet at that time. The engagement brought together the decisive elements that had come to define modern naval warfare by the closing months of the conflict. Signals, intelligence, radar superiority, coordinated torpedo tactics, and the irreversible decline of a once formidable navy. By May 1945, the course of the war in the Pacific had swung decisively in favor of the Allies. Germany's surrender in early May freed the Royal Navy to concentrate its full strength on the Pacific theater. The British East Indies Fleet had been deployed to the Indian Ocean since 1944, controlling the sea routes from India to Malaya and blockading Japanese-held ports at Singapore, Penang, and Sabang. The strategic objective was to sever supply lines between isolated Japanese garrisons scattered across the islands. On the Japanese side, the catastrophic losses at the Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944 had effectively destroyed the main striking force. Aircraft carriers, battleships, and the great majority of heavy cruisers had been lost. The Imperial Japanese Navy retained only a handful of large warships still capable of operations. Haguro was among the last surviving heavy cruisers alongside Tone and Takao. All three, however, were damaged and possessed limited combat capability. On the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, approximately 3,000 Japanese troops were suffering acute shortages of food and ammunition. The Naval Command in Singapore planned a resupply mission using fast warships. Haguro was selected because of her superior speed compared with conventional transports and her capacity for self-defense. The cruiser was ordered to carry roughly 200 troops together with ammunition, provisions, and medical supplies to Port Blair in the Andaman Islands. The destroyer Kamikaze was assigned as escort. The mission was fraught with risk. British naval and air superiority in the Indian Ocean meant that any Japanese surface sortie faced probable interception. Nevertheless, the desperate condition of the Andaman garrison left the Japanese command with few alternatives. I.J.N. Haguro was a Myoko-class heavy cruiser built at the Mitsubishi Naval Shipyard in Nagasaki and commissioned on the 25th of April, 1929. She measured 203.76 meters in length, 17 meters in beam, with a draft of 6.19 meters. Standard displacement was 10,367 tons. Full load displacement reached 13,433 tons. The propulsion plant comprised 12 Campon boilers and 4 Campon steam turbines, producing a design output of 152,000 horsepower and a maximum speed of 35.5 knots under original specifications. In terms of firepower, Haguro's main armament consisted of 10 Type 3 203mm guns mounted in 5 twin turrets. Secondary armament comprised 8 Type 89 127mm guns in 4 twin turrets, capable of engaging both surface and aerial targets. The ship carried 16 Type 93 long-lance 610mm torpedo tubes arranged in 4 quadruple launchers. The Type 93 torpedo had a range of 40 kilometers at 36 knots, with a warhead weighing 490 kilograms. Anti-aircraft defense consisted of 8 Type 96 25mm guns and light machine guns. The main belt armor was 102mm thick, deck armor 35mm, and conning tower armor 76mm. Haguro possessed an extensive combat record. From December 1941, she served with the 5th Fleet Southern Force during the Southeast Asian Offensive. In February 1942, she took part in the Dutch East Indies Campaign and the Battle of the Java Sea on the 27th of February, in which the ABDA Allied force was defeated. In March 1942, Haguro and her sister, ship Nachi, sank the destroyer HMS Encounter and the cruiser HMS Exeter. In 1943, the ship operated in the Philippine Sea and the Rabaul area. In October 1944, Haguro participated in the Battle of Leyte Gulf, specifically the Battle of Surigao Strait, on the night of the 24th to the 25th of October, where Japanese forces were ambushed and suffered devastating losses. By May 1945, however, Haguro's material condition was poor. After 4 years of continuous warfare, the ship had received no comprehensive overhaul. The propulsion system was delivering only roughly 70% of its design output because of damaged turbines and boilers. Actual maximum speed had fallen to between 26 and 28 knots, far below the original 35.5 knots. The Type 94 fire control system was obsolete. Haguro lacked modern long-range search radar, carrying only a Type 21 short-range air warning set, a critical disadvantage in night combat. Her complement stood at approximately 900, but the majority of seasoned sailors had been killed in earlier engagements, and the current crew included many hastily trained recruits. The ship was commanded by Vice Admiral Hashimoto Shintaro, a veteran officer who had graduated from the Naval Academy in 1915 and had commanded numerous destroyers and cruisers during the war. Despite his personal experience, the odds against a successful mission were formidable. Hashimoto was sailing into waters dominated by British air and naval power, with a ship whose fighting capacity had been gravely diminished, and a crew that lacked the seasoning of the men who had fought in the earlier years of the war. The British force committed to the action was the 26th Destroyer Flotilla, commanded by Captain Manly Lawrence Power. Power was an officer of wide experience in night fighting and torpedo attacks, having led destroyer formations in the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. The flotilla leader, HMS Saumarez, was an S-class destroyer, 115 meters in length, displacing 2,500 tons with a maximum speed of 36 knots. Her armament comprised 4 114mm or 4.7-inch guns, 8 40mm Bofors anti-aircraft guns, and 8 Mark 9 533mm torpedoes. Most crucially, the ship was fitted with Type 2 93 radar for surface search, Type 2 91 radar for air warning, and a modern fire control system. The remaining 4 ships, HMS Venus, Verulam, Vigilant, and Virago, were V-class destroyers of comparable specification. All carried modern radar, and their crews were thoroughly trained in night tactics. Each ship embarked 8 Mark 9 torpedoes with a range of 13.7 kilometers at 35 knots and a 340-kilogram Torpex warhead. The balance of forces clearly favored the British. 5 modern destroyers equipped with advanced radar and highly trained crews against 1 weakened heavy cruiser and a single escort destroyer. The radar advantage, above all, would prove decisive in the night action that followed. Where Haguro was effectively blind beyond visual range in darkness, the British destroyers could track her movements with precision from well beyond gun range, coordinate their approach without revealing themselves, and time their torpedo attacks to maximum effect. On the 9th of May, 1945, Haguro and Kamikaze left Singapore for the first time, but were compelled to turn back after intelligence warned of British warships in the area. On the 14th of May, the 2 ships sailed again. On the 15th of May, Grumman Avenger reconnaissance aircraft of the Royal Navy sighted the Japanese vessels. Bombers attacked, but inflicted only minor damage on Haguro. One British aircraft was shot down and its crew taken prisoner. In reality, British intelligence had learned of the plan in advance through the Ultra Signals Intelligence Program. Admiral Harold Walker, commander of the East Indies Fleet, ordered the 26th Destroyer Flotilla to execute an interception under the codename Operation Dukedom. The 5 destroyers sailed at high speed from their base at Trincomalee, Ceylon, present-day Sri Lanka, heading eastward. On the afternoon of the 15th of May, Royal Air Force Liberator patrol aircraft spotted Haguro and Kamikaze steering southward. By approximately 2200 hours that evening, the 26th Flotilla had reached its intercept position in the Malacca Strait. Captain Power estimated that Haguro would pass through the area during the night or in the early hours of the following morning. He deployed a hunting formation with destroyers spread to maximize radar coverage. At approximately 23:15 hours, radar aboard HMS Verulam, and shortly afterwards Venus, detected a large contact at a range of roughly 12 nautical miles. The radar return indicated a major warship making approximately 18 to 20 knots. Power confirmed the target as Haguro. He ordered his ships to increase speed to 30 knots and to assume attack formation. The tension aboard the British destroyers was palpable. Every man knew that the next hours would bring a close-range fight against a ship whose main battery could destroy a destroyer with a single well-placed salvo. Power's tactics drew on the Royal Navy's accumulated experience of night fighting. He divided his force into 2 groups to create an encirclement. The destroyers would close from multiple bearings and attack with torpedoes. The aim was to force Haguro to face torpedo salvos from both directions simultaneously, severely restricting her room to maneuver. All destroyers extinguished their lights and observed absolute radio silence, communicating only by shielded signal lamps. Haguro and Kamikaze continued on a steady course, entirely unaware that they were being tracked through darkness, rain, and lightning. Between 0105 and 0111 hours on the 16th of May, the British destroyers reached engagement range. Saumarez fired star shells to illuminate the targets. Haguro and Kamikaze were suddenly thrown into stark relief at a distance of approximately 3 kilometers, roughly 6,000 yards. Saumarez opened fire with her 4.7-inch guns. The second salvo struck Haguro, damaging the bridge and superstructure. Haguro immediately returned fire with her 203mm and 127mm guns. Enormous columns of water erupted around Saumarez. At the same moment, Kamikaze appeared off the starboard side of Saumarez, only 3,000 yards away, and on a collision course. Saumarez threw her helm hard to starboard to avoid ramming and raked Kamikaze with 40mm Bofors fire as the 2 ships swept past each other. Kamikaze sustained light damage. At approximately 0115 hours, Saumarez and Verulam launched torpedoes at close range. Haguro was maneuvering violently and firing heavily. 3 torpedoes struck the cruiser, inflicting severe damage. The ship began to lose speed and developed a list. At 0125 hours, Venus closed and fired her torpedoes. 1 struck Haguro, adding to the destruction. 2 minutes later, at 0127, Virago launched her salvo. 2 torpedoes found their mark. Haguro's speed dropped to no more than a few knots. She was listing heavily and ablaze. From roughly 0130 to 0200 hours, British destroyers continued to pour gunfire into Haguro at close range. Over 100 4.7-inch shells were fired at the stricken cruiser. Haguro still attempted to reply with whatever guns remained in action, but with her fire control system wrecked accuracy was negligible. During this phase, Vigilant and Venus launched additional torpedoes. In total, Haguro was struck by between 6 and 9 torpedoes, depending on the historical source consulted. The relentless succession of torpedo and shell detonations tore open the hull. Seawater flooded the main compartments. Fires spread unchecked. The list increased to 30 degrees. Kamikaze, having sustained light damage, withdrew from the battle area. Unable to render assistance against 5 British destroyers, she escaped and eventually returned to Singapore. Between approximately 0206 and 0232 hours on the morning of the 16th of May, 1945, Haguro began to capsize and founder. Historical sources record slightly differing times, but all fall within this interval. The ship rolled onto her side, her bottom momentarily exposed, before slipping beneath the surface. Witnesses among the British crews described the eerie sight of the great cruiser's hull briefly silhouetted against the lightning-streaked sky, before vanishing into the depths. The position of sinking was approximately 05 degrees 05 minutes north, 098 degrees 20 minutes east, in the Malacca Strait, roughly 55 nautical miles from Penang, at a depth of between 64 and 67 meters. Between 751 and 900 of those on board perished, among them Vice Admiral Hashimoto Shintaro and Rear Admiral Kaju Sugiura. Sugiura was posthumously promoted to Vice Admiral. Many sailors leapt into the darkened sea, struggling amid oil, debris, and strong currents. The British destroyers did not carry out an immediate rescue, owing to the perceived threat of Japanese submarine activity in the area and the fact that they remained on a combat footing. For the survivors in the water, hours of uncertainty followed in the tropical darkness. The following day, the destroyer Kamikaze returned to the area and recovered approximately 320 survivors adrift at sea. The only survivors from Haguro's complement of close to 900. On the British side, no ships were lost. HMS Saumarez was damaged by 203mm shells from Haguro. One round destroyed the main radar aerial and the funnel cap, while another struck the forecastle. Casualties were recorded as either 2 killed or 2 wounded, depending on the source. All 5 destroyers returned safely to Trincomalee. The battle lasted approximately 3 hours. Measured from the first radar contact at around 2300 to 2315 hours on the 15th of May, to Haguro's sinking between 0206 and 0232 on the 16th. The main engagement phase, from roughly 0105 to 0111 until the ship went down, spanned approximately 1 hour to 1.5 hours. The 26th Destroyer Flotilla fired a total of between 20 and 30 torpedoes over the course of the action, of which at least 6 to 9 struck home. 4.7-inch shells from the destroyers also inflicted substantial damage on Haguro's superstructure and bridge. The victory of the 26th Flotilla resulted from the convergence of several factors. First, Ultra Signals intelligence had provided early warning of Japanese intentions, enabling the British to deploy proactively. Second, the technological advantage of radar allowed the destroyers to detect and shadow their quarry through the darkness without being detected in return. Third, Captain Power's encircling tactics and multi-axis torpedo attacks left Haguro unable to evade effectively. Fourth, Haguro's degraded material condition, in particular her reduced speed and absence of radar, rendered her acutely vulnerable in a night engagement. The action is recognized as the last torpedo night battle and the last major surface engagement of the Second World War. It was also the final instance in which Royal Navy destroyers sank a major warship by torpedo in surface combat and the last heavy cruiser of the Imperial Japanese Navy to be destroyed in direct ship-to-ship action. Admiral Lord Louis Mountbatten, Supreme Allied Commander, Southeast Asia, commended the tactics of the 26th Destroyer Flotilla in this night engagement. Operation Dukedom was judged a success in severing Japan's supply route. The Andaman garrison, already in dire straits, would receive no further reinforcement by sea. Within 3 months, Japan surrendered unconditionally, and the troops on the islands were taken into captivity without the supplies that Haguro had been sent to deliver. In 2003, an expedition aboard the vessel M.F. Empress located Haguro's wreck on the floor of the Malacca Strait. The wreck lies at a depth of between 64 and 67 meters, relatively intact and upright. Number 1 turret had been knocked free and rests beside the hull, its gun barrels pointing skyward. The bridge and mast were heavily damaged. Numerous holes caused by torpedoes and shells are clearly visible. In 2010, a detailed survey was conducted, documenting the condition of the wreck. Under international maritime law, Haguro's wreck is classified as a war grave containing the remains of more than 700 to 900 sailors. In 2014, however, the wreck was illegally salvaged for scrap metal. Crane barges dismantled a substantial portion of the superstructure and the more accessible metalwork. Malaysian authorities subsequently intensified enforcement, but by then Haguro had already sustained serious damage. As of 2025, the greater part of the wreck has been removed, despite international recognition of the site as a war grave that should be protected. The Battle of the Malacca Strait on the 16th of May, 1945, stands as one of the final events to close the era of traditional surface naval warfare, an era in which warships confronted one another directly with torpedoes and gunfire in the darkness. The loss of Haguro marked not only the near-total collapse of Japanese naval power, but also symbolized the broader transformation of naval warfare into a new age, one in which radar, signals, intelligence, and coordinated multi-axis tactics determined the outcome of battle. For the Royal Navy, the action demonstrated that well-handled destroyers, armed with modern sensors and operating under sound tactical leadership, could overwhelm a far heavier opponent. For the Imperial Japanese Navy, Haguro's loss was among the final blows in a long succession of irreplaceable defeats that left the once mighty fleet a shadow of its former strength. Today, the story of Haguro's last voyage and her final resting place beneath the waters of the Malacca Strait serves as a somber reminder of the human cost of war and the fragility of the ships that carried men into battle.